the Mazda 787 and its derivative 787B were Group C sports prototype racing cars built by Mazda for use in the World Sportscar Championship, All Japan Sports Prototype Championship, as well as the 24 Hours of Le Mans from 1990 to 1991. Designed to combine a mixture of the FAR copyright DAO copyright Ration Internationale du Sport Automobile Group C regulations with the International Motorsports Association GTP regulations, the 787s were the last Wankel rotary-powered racing cars to compete in the World and Japanese Championships, using Mazda's R26B engine. Although the 787 and 787B lacked the single-lap pace of World Championship competitors such as Mercedes-Benz, Jaguar, and Porsche, as well as Japanese Championship competitors Nissan and Toyota, the Mazdas had reliability which allowed them to contend for their respective championships. The reliability of the cars eventually paid off in 1991 when a 787B driven by Johnny Herbert, Volker Weidler, and Bertrand Gachot went on to victory in the 1991 24 Hours of Le Mans. This remains as of 2014 the only victory by a Japanese marque as well as the only victory by a car not using a reciprocating engine design. A total of 2 787s were constructed in 1990, while 3 newer specifications 787BS were built in 1991. Development. At its heart, the initial design of the 787 was an evolution of the 767 and 767B designs that had been used by Mazda in 1988 and 1989. Many mechanical elements of the 767 were carried over by Nigel Stroud when he designed the 787, but with some notable exceptions. Foremost was the replacement of the 767's 13J Wankel rotary engine. In its place, the brand-new A26B was installed. The custom-built A26B featured a nearly identical layout and displacement, but included new design elements such as continuously variable intakes and 3 spark plugs per rotor instead of the 20B's 2. This allowed for a maximum power output of 900 HP which was limited to 700 horsepower during the race for longevity. Porsche's 5-speed gearbox was retained. Other modifications made to the 787's design included a relocation of the radiators. Initially placed beside the cockpit on the 767, a new single radiator was integrated into the nose of the 787. Air moved from the blunt nose of the car underneath the bodywork and through the radiator before exiting at the top of the nose. A gurney flap was affixed to the radiator exit to increase front-end downforce. This new radiator location also meant a redesign of the doors of the car, where the old radiator design had been located. The intake in front of the door and exit behind were no longer necessary and were thus not included, giving the 787 a smoother bodywork design on top. To aid in rear engine and brake cooling, intakes were placed on the side bodywork, immediately above the exhaust cooling vents. As before, Stroud's monocoque design was built from carbon and Kevlar by Advanced Composite Technology in the United Kingdom. Carbon fiber body panels were affixed to the 2 initial chassis that were built in 1990. 787B. Following the 1990 season, Mazda continued development of the 787 chassis in order to make improvements on its pace and reliability. One major development was the intake system for the rotaries. In the past, Mazda had developed variable-length telescopic intake runners to optimize engine power and torque for varying RPMs. For 1991, the system became continuously variable, rather than previous versions that had steps for different engine ranges. The 787B's onboard ECU controlled the action of the telescopic intake. 3 new 787BS were built for 1991. While the 2 existing 787s were also upgraded with the new intakes. Racing history. 1990, the first 787 chassis made its competition debut in April 1990, at the second round of the All Japan Sports Prototype Championship season. For the Inter-Challenge Fuji 1000 km, Mazda speed entered their 787 alongside an older 767B chassis, with Yoshimi Katayama, Dave Kennedy, and Pierre Dieudonné copyrighting the new car. After Fuji, the second 787 chassis was completed, and the team departed for Europe to prepare for Le Mans. Tests were performed at the Silverstone circuits in Great Britain and Autocubdromo do Estoril in Portugal to prepare the car's setups and test its endurance. A total of 2,900 miles were completed over the tests. Former Le Mans winner Jackie Ickx was hired by Mazda Speed in order to prepare the two 787s, as well as an older 767B, for the race. Driver Stefan Johansson joined Kennedy and Dieudonné Copyright in the first car, and Bertrand Gachot, Volker Weidler and Johnny Herbert were hired for the second entry. The all-Japanese lineup of Katayama, Yojiro Terada and Takashi Yorino remained in the 767B. In qualifying, the new 787 set the 22nd and 23rd fastest lap times, ahead of the 767B's 34th fastest time. The two 787s ran reliably for much of the race, lasting through the night until problems were encountered in the early hours of Sunday morning. While leading their GTP class, an oil leak on the number 201 entry for Kennedy, Dieudonné Copyright, and Johansson forced the team to retire the car. 2 hours later, the number 202 787 was also retired after an electrical failure and fire. Heat from the engine was blamed for both failures. The 767B, the only car remaining in its class, survived until the end of the race and finished 20th. After Le Mans, Mazda Speed withdrew the remaining 767B from competition. Two 787s were entered for the rest of the JSPC season, with a Japanese trio of drivers in one entry and Kennedy and Dieudonné Copyright remaining in the other. Returning to Fuji, the 787s earned 5th and 10th place finishes in a 500 km event, although the 5th place finisher was later disqualified due to a fuel cell which was too large. 10th place was again earned at the 1000 km of Suzuka, although the all-Japanese entry retired after an engine failure. A similar result occurred at Shugo, except it was the Japanese squad which finished 11th while the international squad had an engine failure. For the last event of the season, the 1000 km of Fuji, Mazda Speed entered the two 787s and a 767B, brought out of retirement. It finished 6th, one 787 was 7th and the other retired following a transmission failure. Mazda Speed's Yoshimi Katayama earned 25th in the Drivers' Championship, and Mazda was 4th in the Constructors' Championship, 1991. For the 1991 season, Mazda expanded their efforts with the 787. Two cars were assigned to the JSPC series, while a third car ran the full Sportscar World Championship season for the first time, with drivers Dave Kennedy, Maurizio Sandro Sala, and Pierre Dieudonné Copyright assigned to the team. The French Recca team were put in charge of the World Championship campaign. Recca and team consultant Jackie Ickx were able to persuade FISA that the 787s should be allowed to run with less weight than their competitors, leading to FISA allowing the team to run the cars at 830 kg rather than the standard 1000 kg required for the C2 class. Unlike the JSPC series, FISA had begun to integrate regulations for a new engine formula in the World Championship which required all teams to use 3500 cc engines by 1992. Cars which met these regulations in 1991 became the top C1 class, while cars with other engines, including the 787, were reclassified as C2. The C2 class cars also retained the fuel consumption formula that Group C had been founded on, while C1 cars no longer required it. This meant that Mazda now had to fight for class wins within their new class. In the JSPC, however, Mazda's 787s remained in the GTP class, as the sole competitors in the category. The year started in Japan, with Mazda Speed entering two older 787s while the new 787BS were being finalized. Both cars suffered problems and were uncompetitive. Attention then turned to the Suzuka circuit, where the dark copyright-bud race of the World Championship season was being run. The first new 787B chassis arrived alongside an older 787. The newer car, with Sandro Sala and Kennedy, outqualified the older chassis driven by the all-Japanese squad by only an eighth of a second, but the 787B was able to outlast several other competitors and finish in 6th overall, 4th in the C2 class, and earning Mazda points in the championship. The 787B was retained in Japan while the European squad turned to Monza with an older 787. Yojiro Terada and Takashi Yorino earned the new 787B another 6th-place finish at the 1000 km of Fuji, while the European team finished 7th at Monza on the same day. A poor race at Silverstone added no points to Mazda's World Championship total before the team concentrated on Le Mans. Following the team's Le Mans victory, Mazda Speed returned to Fuji once more with a 787B, and improved their season results with a 4th-place finish followed by another 6th at Suzuka. A third 787B was completed by October, and the two cars finished in 3rd and 4th places at the second 1000 km of Fuji. To end the season, the team finished in 6th at Sportsland SUGO, earning Mazda 4th in the Constructors' Championship, and Takashi Yorino 14th in the Drivers' Championship. The European squad meanwhile continued to use the older 787, finishing in 5th at the Nürburgring Quarter-Ring and 7th at Magny-Cours. The championship then flew to Mexico City where Mazda finished 9th, before the season ended back in Japan. The two 787Bs of the Japanese squad replaced the older 787, and the two cars finished in 9th and 10th places. Mazda Speed finished 5th in the team's championship, and Maurizio Sandro Sala earned 15th place in the Drivers' Championship, 24 Hours of Le Mans, the 59th 24 Hours of Le Mans, which was round 4 of the World Sportscar Championship, was the first time the race took place at the entirely new pit complex, much to the pleasure of pit crews and drivers, after several years of having to use the notoriously cramped area, which became associated with the film Le Mans. Mazda Speed entered 3 cars and a spare. One of them was a 787 from the previous year, numbered number 56, driven by Diodonna Copyright, Yorino and Terada, and 2 brand new 787Bs. One of them was driven by Maurizio Sandro Sala, who replaced the newly retired Katayama, Johansson and Kennedy, numbered number 18 and the number 55 car of Weidler, Herbert and Gachot, making its only appearance in its only race. Unlike the other 2 cars, which were painted in their standard blue stripes on white livery, number 55 had an outrageous bright orange and green scheme in honor of a main sponsor, Renown, a Japanese clothing manufacturer which had been supporting the team since 1988 by providing all their clothing for the events. The spare car was another 787 from the previous year and also qualified, but took no further part in the event. Mazda was not the favorite to win, but the 3 Mazdas started on 19th, 23rd and 30th, despite being the 12th, 17th and 24th fastest qualifiers respectively. The new 3.5-litre cars were given the first grid positions, moving everyone else back by 7 places. On the day before the race, team manager Ohashi decided to drop his usual conservative strategy and instructed the drivers of the number 55 car to drive as if it were a short sprint race. The decision was made based on the reliability of the cars demonstrated in the Paul Ricard tests, as well as the car's exceptional fuel economy, which meant that the carefully learned driving techniques intended to preserve the fuel allowance were no longer a critical part of the team's strategy. In the early stages of the race, the number 55 car made its way to 3rd place with the number 18 car behind it 2 laps down. The number 18 had a lower gear ratio set up, meaning the car used less fuel but was 20 km/h slower. The number 55 moved into 2nd place when the Mercedes-Benz C11 of Michael Schumacher, Fritz Kreutzpointner and Karl Wendlinger span off and later pitted with a gearbox problem. It soon became obvious that the leading car had slowed down to preserve its fuel allowance, and an air of disbelief spread around the Mazda pit as it became obvious with 6 hours to run that there was a chance of victory. At the 22nd hour, fate took a hand and the number 55 car took the lead after the C11 of Alain Fert was forced to pit with mechanical problems. At the last pit stop, Herbert asked to stay in the car, and went on to take the 787B across the finish line first, completing 362 laps and covering 4,932.2 km. The 2 other cars finished 6th and 8th. 3 Jaguar XJR12s and a sole Mercedes filled out positions 2 through 5. Herbert was so dehydrated that he had to be assisted out of the car and taken to the circuit's medical center. As a result, he was unable to make it to the podium, leaving Weidler and Gachot to take up the celebrations. He later commented in a magazine interview that some wedge or spaghetti he ate before his shift was the cause, but it is more likely that his drink bottle wasn't replenished when he chose to stay in the car for the remaining 40 minutes of the race. The replacement driver would normally carry his own bottle into the car during a changeover as they all had their own preferred drinks. The winning car ran without a hitch apart from a blown headlamp bulb and a precautionary rear wheel bearing change on the driver's side of the car, when a regular check during a pit stop showed it to be overheating slightly. Life after Le Mans. After Le Mans, the winning car retired from duty while the other 2 cars continued to race. Mazda would go on to finish 4th and 5th in the Japanese and World Championship respectively, with a season-high 3rd in the 1000 km Fuji race. As Mazda used different drivers throughout the season, none of their drivers finished in the top 10 in points. After the 1991 24 Hours of Le Mans, the 787B would compete once more at the last race of the season, 430 kilometers of Autopolis, finishing 9th and 10th. At the end of the season, Wankel-type rotary engines were outlawed and, as per FAR copyright Ration Internationale de l'Automobile's earlier decision, 3.5-litre Formula One engines became the new formula for the 1992 season. The following year, Mazda entered the MX-01, based on the Jaguar XJR14 and powered by a Judd unit, without much success. Despite the success of the 787B and its Wankel power plant, Mazda did not exploit its historic victory through marketing campaigns and advertising. However, it partially improved sales for Mazda's road cars. In the United Kingdom, Mazda would release a special edition of its MX-5 with a racing color and also a BBR turbo conversion. Only 24 were produced and the car is one of the most sought-after special edition cars of its model. Long a proponent of the rotary engine, Mazda has maintained a rotary-engined road car for many years, though sales of the Mazda RX-7 was stopped in North America after the 1995 model year until the release of the 2003 Mazda RX-8. The Mazda RX-8 utilized a new generation of the Mazda Wankel engine, dubbed Renesis, which uses side intake and exhaust ports. Of the winning drivers, Herbert would have a successful career in Formula One, notching up 3 wins before leaving the championship in 2000 and returning to sportscar racing. Gachot would go on to drive at Jordan Grand Prix before being given an 18-month prison sentence in August for a CS gas attack on a taxi driver in London. His place for the Belgian Grand Prix was famously filled by newcomer Michael Schumacher. He was finally released after 2 months and had minor successes before retiring altogether. Weidler would compete in the Japanese Formula 3000 Championship, only to have his career cut short when he was diagnosed with tinnitus. It was recommended he should take time off to allow for an operation, but he chose to retire from the sport and handed his seat over to Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Of the non-winning drivers, Dieudonné Copyright would later hang up his helmet and become sporting director at Reca, this time backed by Chrysler to help the Dodge Viper to score class wins at Le Mans by the late 90s and an overall win at the 24 Hours of Daytona in 2000. Terada, a veteran of the race since 1974, continued to run his Autoix tuning business. He still competed at Le Mans, although without factory backing, but showing no signs of retiring. The former F1 driver, Johansson, would return to IndyCar duties, frequently competing in the race before returning full-time. The A26B engine would be used by Mazda in its Mazda RX 792P for its premier IMSA GTP category with limited success. The engine continued to be used in the GTS category, for the Spaceframe FD3S RX-7, which would return to Le Mans in 1994, backed by Mazda Speed. The livery would return again in 1995, when a rotary-powered Kuzu, which was competing in IMSA Euro 1 registered trademark SWSC, a category with different regulations than the FIA. This time they would start the race without the renowned sponsorship, and in 1996 in the lower-end LMP2 category, which was the last time Mazda used the livery. Mazda Speed would continue to compete in the race until 1999. In 2002, Otto-X Motorsport with Yojiro Terada as one of its drivers participated in 24 Hours of Le Mans using a 26B 2.6L 4-rotor engine in a modified WR chassis. However, they did not finish the race. In 2005, BK Motorsport competed a Courage C65 LMP2 prototype in the American Le Mans Series, powered by a Mazda tri-rotary, and painted in a yellow and blue version of the livery worn by the 787B. Today the car is considered by Mazda and rotary enthusiasts as one of the most iconic cars to come from Japan despite the Wankel engine's German origins. The 787B have been celebrated by every major toy and model company in and outside Japan. The 787B is considered as the most popular of the Group C cars and has appeared in several video games. Throughout the Gran Turismo series, the color scheme can be seen as a fictitious compilation of various Mazda paint schemes. In 2005, a factory-backed RX-8 used the renowned colors to compete in a 24-hour race at Silverstone. Mazda keeps the winning car at the Mazda Museum in Hiroshima. At the same time, Mazda produced 4 replicas and gave one of them to the Le Mans Museum. The car usually makes appearances at the annual 7 stock shows, and has made 2 appearances at the Monterey Historics event in 1999 and 2004 and still bears a pair of small oval racing stickers behind the side windows, referring to its appearance at the 1999 Goodwood Festival of Speed, when it was reunited with and driven by Gachot. The 2008 Mazda Furai concept bears the 55 number of the winning 787B. After completing a lengthy restoration, the winning number 55 787B was demonstrated during the pre-race of the 2011 24 Hours of Le Mans. Winning driver Johnny Herbert took the 787B around the Circuit de la Sarre for a demonstration lap. Specifications: 1990-787 specification are in brackets. Chassis body construction, Kevlar carbon fiber composite, wheels, 18 in x 12 in front/18 in x 14.75 in rear. Vogue Racing magnesium alloy, brakes, Carbon Industries outboard ventilated 14-inch carbon discs and calipers, lighting, 2 Cibi headlights on each side, weight, c. 850 kg, engine, spark plugs, 3 per rotor, rotors, 4, fuel system, Nippon Denso electronic fuel injection, battery, pulsar, maximum power, 700 HP/9000 rpm, maximum torque, 448 FTA pound-force per 6500 rpm, instrumentation and telemetry system by Pi Research. From the Mazda Motor Museum website, it claims the engine has a maximum output of 930 HP, and a maximum readline of 10,500 rpms. This setup was not used during racing for worries associated with reliability. References and notes. External links: Mazda 787BA The Legend of Le Mans, Mulsanne Corner article on 26B, animation of 4-rotor engine, R26J, Retro Species 55 Special, Mazda 787B in 1991 Le Mans, Mazda 787B Pictures.